I want to welcome those who are joining us online today for our service. It's a beautiful day in Garden City, and we're all anticipating a wonderful Thanksgiving dinner. And those of you who are watching this online, I will just tell you in advance, it really smells really good. So you don't know what you missed. But we start a new series of sermons, just a 3-part series, and then we're going to finish up December with 4 Christmas sermons. But the series is called That's What They Say. So these are statements we hear all the time. They sound really good. They even sound like they might be coming from the Bible, but they aren't in the Bible. Things like cleanliness is next to godliness. Any of you mothers ever say that to your children or to your husband? I know my wife has. It didn't work. Have you ever sent a text message and realized that what you sent wasn't what you intended to say in the first place? Years ago, I was at IHOP restaurant on a Saturday morning, and Brenda was working as a nurse at the time, so she had gone to come home from work, and she was sleeping. It was a Saturday morning, and I sent Roy Dixon a text. And I said, if you're not doing anything, come and join me for breakfast at IHOP. And he wrote back, what are you doing in Ohio? And I said, no, I'm in IHOP. And as I hit send, my smartphone auto-corrected to the word Ohio. And so I realized what the problem was. Several years ago, I used to have a really neat weekend at the church, and we did a thing called the Day of Service. It actually took about 200 volunteers to do. And I just want to say this was a really neat thing that I picked up when we were visiting a church in the Blackfoot Indian Reservation. We saw what they did it on a small scale, and so we did it here in Garden City. And Wayne's one of Wayne's daughters is doing it with her church over by I was going to say Yoder because my remembrances of her Carmen is a Carriage Crossing. But anyway, so it took about 200 volunteers to do this Day of Service, and my gift to all of them was that I would give them a shirt, a Day of Service shirt, and so that if you came to the Day of Service, you would know the volunteer because they were the ones in the green shirt or the blue shirt or whatever it was that year. So I sent a message to a lady in the church. Her name is Sharon Rupp. Some of you know Sharon. I sent her a text message and I said, on Sunday, can you help me hand out the Day of Service t-shirts? But unfortunately, my stubby fingers didn't spell shirts correctly, and I left a very important letter out of the text. She said, what? And then I reread it and I thought, oh yeah. So now some of you like to text by speaking into your phone, and I'm just going to tell you right now, you need to check your text before you send it, because sometimes what you speak into your phone isn't what actually you intended to say. So one of our members, and I'm not going to reveal who it was, they were sending a text, and they were in their basement, and the TV was on. And so they sent this text to this person, and lo and behold, right in the middle of their text came Jim Carrey's voice on Dumb and Dumber, and he's saying, where's the beer? So guess what was in the text? Where's the beer? This person does not drink, so it was ironic. Things like that happen. Things that we think we mean don't get communicated the way we wanted them to be communicated. Our statement today, we're going to have 3 different statements, one each week. These are things that sound really good, sound like they might be in the Bible, but they in actuality are not. So here's the statement. Everything happens for a reason. Sounds great, but it's not biblical. This week I was driving down the road coming to work, and a song came on the radio, and this guy has an amazing voice. His name is Torrin Wells. And he was singing a song called Joy in the Morning. I could not believe my ears. Here's the first verse. Here's how it begins. Everything happens for a reason. That's the first line. But you don't know what you don't know. And you'll never have peace if you don't let go of tomorrow. Because it ain't even faith till your plan falls apart. But you know, still choose to follow Jesus. Even in the very first line of his song, there's that phrase, everything happens for a reason. It's comforting. We have lost a job, or we're struggling at work, or we're struggling at raising kids, and someone says to us, well, everything happens for a reason, it'll be all right. It kind of becomes our go-to line. We like to use it all the time. We think it's helpful for other people. People make bad choices, and we glibly say, just hang in there, it'll get better. But I ask you, is it really helpful to tell someone that everything happens for a reason? Larry Osborne is a pastor and a Christian writer, and he tells about the response he and his wife got when his wife was diagnosed with cancer. Everyone says this is a blessing that the diagnosis is so clear. But then he noticed that none of them wanted to have the blessing. The reality is that things like this often shake our faith. Today I want to focus on 3 questions that get to the heart of the phrase, everything happens for a reason. First of all, does everything happen for a reason? That's a question. Does everything happen for a reason? At the end of the day, what we are really asking, and this is, if you're doing the subpoints, filling in the blanks, this is A. If God is in control of everything, does he cause everything? If God is in control of everything, does he cause everything? We readily admit that God is control of everything in our universe, and I do not want to even suggest that God cannot do anything. God can do whatever he chooses to do. But the question is, does he cause everything to happen? Are we just puppets and he's pulling the strings in our life? There's a few times in the Bible where God acted. He did cause Moses to part the Red Sea. I believe he put Esther at the right place, the right person at the right place at the right time to save her people. And just a little note about the book of Esther. It's the only book in the Bible that does not mention the word God. Interesting, but it's still in the Bible. And of course, Jesus Christ came to earth to save us from our sins. That's what God did. But we realize also there are some times when God didn't do things. God did not cause Adam and Eve to eat the apple. And let's be honest, it's all Eve's fault. No, it isn't all Eve's fault. No, the women are going, no, Bob. He did not force David to sleep with Bathsheba. He did not build the Tower of Babel. He did not cause the Roman soldiers to kill his son, Jesus. Sometimes he causes things to happen, and at other times he allows things to happen. Sometimes that happens to us over the course of our lives. Things happen because of the poor choices and the decisions that we have made. And sometimes, and I'm not pointing at any one person, so hear me out. Sometimes they happen because of the poor choices that other people have made that impact your life, and you need to know that. It's not your fault. Years ago, a dear friend in Tillamook, Oregon, their 16-year-old son was jogging down the road on his cross-country practice, and a drunk driver came and hit him and killed him. His life was gone. Did God cause that drunk driver to? Absolutely not. And I would never say to Ted and to Linda, oh, everything happens for a reason. Everything happens for, you're going to be better tomorrow. Folks, I can tell you, I know this couple, and they grieved for years and years, and their children grieved for years and years and years the loss of their brother. So what about self-inflicted wounds? These are things that we do to ourselves. We cheat in a business deal, I guarantee you, you're going to pay a price. In fact, I think there's a prominent basketball coach who's currently serving a 4-game suspension for some choices that he's made. Interestingly, I was discussing it with a church member this week who is a rabid fan of this team. And she said to me, well, they all cheat. He just happened to get caught. No, they might all cheat, but he didn't just happen to get caught. You cheat on your spouse and you'll probably end up in divorce court. Do you really think God caused those to happen? No, our bad choices put us there. I don't think any couple that ever got a divorce walked out of the courthouse across the street, waved that decree in the air and said, well, I know God has something better planned for me. I don't think anyone ever thought that. But self-inflicted things happen to us. Part of the problem is we live in a fallen world. And try as we like, I don't think any of us are living in a bubble. So things can happen to us. We are not immune from the problems of the world. And I want you to know that not all of those choices are sinful. Some of them just happen to be poor choices. Brenda and I have a wonderful friend, couple. He was an elder in McMinnville, Oregon. He and his wife were retired school teachers, wonderful, absolutely fabulous, wonderful people. John came to an elders meeting one night and he was kind of downcast, and I said, John, what's going on? And he said, we just found out that the Christian guy that we had invested our money in, that it was a scam. And he's absconded with thousands of dollars of our retirement. John wasn't sinful. He had just been foolish to invest with a friend that he thought was a Christian, but really was a con artist. All right, question number 2. Why do we think it can? Why do we think that everything happens for a reason? And better yet, do we think it might be even biblical? You see, it all centers around our interpretation of one verse in the Bible. And it leads and has led to confusion in the church, honestly, for hundreds of years. Letter A says confusion comes with our understanding of this one verse. Confusion comes with our understanding of one verse. So here is the verse. The verse is Romans 8:28. Now before we look at the verse, I want to share with you some things that you need to understand. The New Testament was not written in English. Okay, we might think it was, it wasn't. The New Testament was written in a language called Koine Greek. It was the common language of the people of the time of Jesus. Flash forward 1,600 years and we have King James on the throne in England, and he's decided, I don't like this Latin Bible, and I certainly can't read Greek, so I'd like us to develop an English translation of the Bible. So in 1611, they came up with a new translation, and guess what they called it? The King James Version of the Bible. Many of us grew up with that. Many of us have it in our hands right now, the King James Version of the Bible. It was written during a time when Shakespearean English was the rage. So there's these and thous and a lot of colorful language, words that were appropriate then but may not translate very well today. So here's what the King James Version says about Romans 8:28. This is the King James Version. And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose. Now I want you to note the emphasis is on all things working for good. Hence it's easy to conclude everything happens for a reason. But then the Dead Sea Scrolls were found in the 1940s. We found all of these amazing documents that were closer to the time of Christ. And then from the 1940s on, we have many, many new translations. One of those is the NIV, New International Version. So I want to read the New International Version. Barb's going to put it up on the screen. This is what Romans 8:28 says in the New International Version. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. I want you to notice that now the emphasis has switched from the good things to the fact that God is the one working for the good, not the things. It is subtle, but it is so important. When you realize that God is working. Sometimes, as I said a couple of weeks ago, God is working on the upstream side of our life. We don't see what's going on back there. He's been working all along, but he does. We believe that man has a free will to choose. It's not right for us to make bad choices and blame God. So now we come to the final question. What do we believe in? What do you really believe in? So I want to share with you two things. Some good news, great news, and then I want to share with you some shocking news, okay? So here's the good news. It's A. Good news. In all things, God works for good. In all things, God works for good. That's what it says. It can be a blessing to be learned or a blessing to be found. God is always good, but not all things are good. Bad things still happen, but God is able to work through those things. You need to know that the enemy is going to take shots at you. He's going to try to stop God's plan in your life. But you need to know the enemy doesn't stand a chance. Our stupidity cannot stop God's plan. We've all done dumb things, stupid things. We all know churches where the pastor has suffered a moral failure. But guess what? The church is still being used by God. I mentioned to you my friend John and his wife Rosalind. They made a poor choice in who they invested their money, but I want you to know John and his wife are two of the most committed, dedicated people the world has ever known. And they have blessed not only their family, but their church and their community. Some of you have faced bankruptcy, but I want you to know God is still there. We've all been to funerals where everyone is in deep grief, but we realize that the loss of that life, because of the loss of that life of that one person, others came to know Jesus. Years ago, Brenda and I visited a grocery store in Oregon City, Oregon. And working that day was a 17-year-old girl in our church. We stopped and visited with her, and we went on about our business that Thursday night. About 1 o'clock in the morning, I get a call from her father. She had skidded off the road in black ice and hit a tree, and she was in the hospital. She died 5 days later. Several people will tell you, I can assure you, she did a lot of good things in her 17 years of her life, but because of her funeral and the impact that it had on those hundreds of her teenage friends who came to it, many people came to Christ. Here's the important thing to remember. God is at work even when the world is bad, even when others are bad, and even when you and I are bad. God is still at work. He's at work to do his plans, and that's good news. But here's the shocking news. Number B, letter B. Here's the shocking news. The promise is not for everyone. Promise is not for everyone. There's some promises in the Bible that for everyone, but not all of them. This promise comes with two pieces of criteria, and you have to meet that criteria to receive the promise. If you want God working in your life, even in the worst days of your life, then there are two things that you need to do. First of all, you need to love God. Scripture says it is for those who love God. It's the first thing you do. It doesn't say that we have to be perfect, but it does say we have to love God. I would tell you it's not optional. It's not, well, I love God on Sundays, but the rest of the week, not so much. So let me ask you a question, folks. If you loved your family, your wife, your spouse, in the same way you love Jesus, how would your marriage be? What if you told her, well, I'll come and talk to you once a week, and I'll give you the leftovers of my money, I don't think you'd have a happy marriage. But why do we think we can be that way with God? He says you don't have to be perfect. You just have to love me. You just have to love me. It's not optional. Then we have a second criteria. Here's what it says. 2, for those who are called according to his purposes. So what does it mean? For those who are called according to his purposes. You have to want to be about what Jesus was about. Loving God and loving people. When you follow Jesus, you want the same things he wants. When that happens, all sorts of good things happen in your life. Here's the truth. God does not care about your bank account. God does not care about what house you live in and what side of the street it's on. He doesn't give a rip about the car that you drive or the possessions that you have or the successes that you've had or the trophies that are in your room. What he cares about is your soul. And I'm going to say that again. What he ultimately cares about is your soul. When your world is falling apart, he will allow you to run to him. In all things, God can work for the good. COVID-19 came, and many of us who sheltered in place for weeks and months, some of us, all we got out of it was a new list of TV shows we watch or Netflix shows. But for others of us, I believe COVID drew us closer together. And we saw our church being the church even when we couldn't meet in this beautiful sanctuary. For 3 months, we didn't even open these doors. But I guarantee you, from March to June, the church didn't shut down. We still did great things. I want to close with a story. A pastor in California named Rusty George told. He tells of a couple in his church that had experienced 3 miscarriages. Now, those of you that have gone through that, you know the pain of those miscarriages. They had gone through 3 of them. They got so tired of their well-meaning Christian friends saying to them, well, just remember, everything happens for a reason. He told Rusty, he said, I have gotten so tired of hearing that phrase, everything happens for a reason. He said, I've given it a new phrase. And it's my conclusion. Here's the new phrase. Everything can be redeemed. You see, God hasn't caused everything to happen in your life, but he can redeem it. Most of all, he wants to redeem you and your soul. Mike Weaver is a fairly large man. And he loves to do woodworking, and when he's not performing on stage as a singer, he's in his woodworking shop working with his hands because he likes doing that. And one day, Mike Weaver said, I was in my garage and I was looking at all the tools that I possessed and looking at all the stuff around me. And he said, I said to myself, I'm not a good person. I don't know why God would even love me or if he could love me. And he said right there in the garage, he had a little bit of a pity party. We've all been there. things happen in our life, we want to throw a pity party. And I've been there with several of you when we had one together. And he said God laid it on his heart that I needed to know, no matter what, God has already loved me. And God has already sent his son for me. And he paid the price for my life. So he wrote a powerful song. It's called Redeemed. We're going to sing it as our closing song. But I want you to know, I know there are people in this room